Father, and I'm going to tell my children that I sucked at school. And I'm going to tell them exactly why I sucked. And I sucked at school because I was 100% lazy. I was that annoying kid in class who literally, I would study 15 minutes before an exam and get like an 85 or a 90. Things came to me so naturally, and I would put no effort. And then ultimately, I would show up to a whole bunch of exams without even studying, thinking that I'm going to ace them, and I would flunk. And what would end up happening is that because of my laziness, everything turned sour. I literally lost 2 years of my academic career because of the fact that I had no idea and I wanted to invest no energy whatsoever into my academic career, which basically led me to switch programs almost 3 times. So here's the story. In Quebec, there's no such thing as grade 12, right? After grade 11, you jump directly into what they call CGIP, right? So when you go into CGIP, you have to choose your program. So my older brother, who is now at Buna Kruldos, he went into computer science, right? So I'm like, what do you do? He's like, oh, I write programs. And you'd think that I would ask more questions, right? I immediately assumed that, well, he's going to write programs, so basically that means that, he's doing all these things with computers, and you got to keep in mind, in the late 90s, computer science wasn't what it is today, okay? And programming wasn't what it is today. But it was just about to begin booming. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I love cartoons. And what I want to do is I want to work for these companies like Pixar, and I want to work for Disney, and I want to do the next Monsters Inc., and that's what I want to do, okay? Because I used to love drawing, and I actually was not bad at it. But here I am thinking that I want to get into multimedia so I could do these kind of movies. So without any further questions, I apply in computer science, and I get accepted. My first ever class is C++. Does anybody know what C++ is? It's basically the kind of course that makes you try to go to find the hardware store and buy the biggest nail and try to shove it into your eye because you can't stand what you have to do. I hated it. I was absolutely terrified from it. I literally, I wanted to find the nearest window and jump out of it. I couldn't stand it. And here is this guy telling me you have to, basically do, this if this, then that, and semicolon this, and semicolon that, and I don't know what, and all this, the language of C++, and I was dying, and I'm like, you got to be kidding. When are we going to get into the real stuff? When are you going to show me how to be able to use a computer and the programs of the computer to be able to do creative things? He goes, well, you are, because your final exam is to basically write a program that can take orders for pizza. I'm like, what? He's like, yep, you're going to write a program where somebody's going to be able to enter in the information, and it's going to print out the receipt at the end. I couldn't believe it. So what did I do? I thought I dropped classes, and turns out I didn't know how to drop classes. So I was still enrolled in the classes, and I totally missed the midterm. So the teacher hated me. He really, he hated me because I was really annoying. I was at the back of the class. I sort of did what Michael was doing. I basically talked as loud as he was, but in the back. And he was really bothered by this. So he came to me at the end of the year, and he told me, listen, the midterm is worth 70%. Okay? You need 50% to pass this class. Right? So far, sorry, the midterm was worth 50%, and I needed 50% to pass. And so far, I hadn't accumulated any points. I thought I dropped the class. So he's like, actually, I actually deducted some points off of you because of participation. So you're actually at negative, 2. I'm like, that's impossible. How can I be below 0? He's like, well, that's the way it is. But I'll tell you what, because I'm a good guy, if you get 100% on your exam, I'll give you those 2 points and I'll pass you. I was so infuriated that I went and spent literally 72 hours with the most ingenious guy we had at our church. This guy, literally, he could have worked for Microsoft, he could have worked for Bill Gates, he could have worked for whoever he wanted. He's a genius. 72 hours with this guy, I went into the exam and I aced it. I got 100%. I made sure to go back to see him and to tell him that, thank you for the donation of the 2 points, I really appreciate it. He had no choice but to boost me, and he passed me. Why am I sharing this story with you? I have to admit to you that I was incredibly lazy. I have to admit to you that I didn't ask questions before any decisions that I made in my academic career. It made me lose a tremendous amount of time. And ultimately, my father, the priest, the confessor, he sat with me. And for those of you guys who know anybody from Montreal, Father Seraphim, he sat with me, and he literally tore me apart. I remember confessing some very, very horrible things to him. And he was so kind and so loving. And his love was enough to make me cry. And he would hug me and tell me, it's okay, and don't worry, and God is forgiving, and God will be able to help you and support you and do this. As soon as I told him what I was doing in school, the man who is a saint, who I am sure walks on water, goes, boom, and he smacks me right across the back. He punches me. Right on the side. I'm like, what are you doing? You can't do this. You're a priest. You're not supposed to be hitting people. And he's like, up until this point, everything you've said, God can forgive. Stupidity, he will not. I go, how does that make any sense? Like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm not going to forgive you if you flunk. And I told him why. He goes, you want people to walk around noticing how Christian you are, but how big of a failure you are, and you don't think that's misrepresenting God? That really struck home with me. He told me, you and everyone else is called to some extent to also be a priest. I told him, what are you talking about? You got to keep in mind that this, like, I'm 18, there is no way the priesthood is even anywhere near my thoughts. And he's telling me, you're also called to be a priest, and every single one of your peers are called to be priests. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, every single one of you has to treat your desk as if it was an altar. And every single book that you open is the offering that you offer to God. And you stand in front of that altar with that offering and you tell him, despite the fact that I don't want to do this, despite the fact that every ounce of my being does not want to be here right now and be doing this right now and not be stressed with this right now, I'm offering it to you. I am offering it to you. And if you offer God the effort of your studies, and if you offer God the life of success that he will give you in return, God will bless it in ways that you have no idea. No idea. Some of you guys are studying medicine. Others are studying, I don't know what you're studying. Okay? No matter what it is that you're studying, you have the opportunity to be able to tell God, I'm offering you this. I'm offering it to you. I want you to bless me, not so I could have a big home and a big bank account. I want you to bless me so that I could be a light in whatever field it is that you're going to give me. If I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be known not just as a doctor, but as a doctor who glorifies your name. If I'm going to be a dentist, I'm going to be a dentist that glorifies your name. If I'm going to be an engineer, if I'm going to be a journalist, if I'm going to be a dancer, all of those things, you have the opportunity to offer it up to God. I'll share with you something that to me is inspirational. King Solomon in the book of Proverbs says something wonderful. He says, commit your works to the Lord. Commit your works to the Lord, and your thoughts will be established. Commit your works, and your thoughts will be established. I love this because as a student, I have to share this with you. I'm studying right now at the University of St. Paul, so believe me, crunch time, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I haven't studied in ages. To be able to write papers now, I forgot how to type. Anyways, if you commit your works to the Lord, your thoughts will be established. The amount of times that I draw blanks, the amount of times where I feel like my mind is saturated, it can't move forward. If I go to God and I say, I commit my works, I commit my studies to you, then my thoughts will be established. God can bless those little times that I offer to him. Every single time that you sit down to study it, don't simply consider it being an investment of your future career. Look at it as prayer. In those moments where you sit down and study, let it be communion with God. Before you open those books, say a prayer. I remember before every exam, Father Seraphim used to tell me, do the sign of the cross on top. One teacher hated it. He threatened me. He threatened me. And he said, there is no room for this on examinations. I told him, as far as I'm concerned, this is my property, this is my exam. Once you grade it, you can erase it if you want because you're going to keep it. But until then, the cross stays on. He reported me. And it turned out to be this humongous thing. Eventually, obviously, he had nothing on me, but every single opportunity you have, even if it's to testify with a cross on top of your paper, so be it. But include God in every single step, and I promise you, whatever it is that you offer to God, whether it be in your studies, in your examinations, or in your careers, God will bless it. Because God does not simply want people to walk around as if they were like this false idea of humility. Oh, poor is me, oh, woe is me, and I am nothing, and I am worthless, and I can't do anything because God only can work through me. No, God wants lawyers and doctors and pharmacists and entrepreneurs, and God wants people to be successful. God wants people who can build churches. God wants people who can support families. God wants people who will give their livelihood for the sake of others. The richer you are, the more you can give. And that's what God wants. And he will bless you if you tell him. If you tell him, what you give me, I'm going to offer back to you. Look at the examples that we have in the Old Testament of people who would come to God and tell him, whatever you offer me, Lord, I'm going to offer back to you. The perfect example is the Holy Virgin Mother, Saint Mary, the Theotokos. Her mother promised God and said, what you offer me, I'm going to offer back to you. And look at the offering she gave back. She didn't just offer a little girl to a temple. She offered the mother of God. We have great examples of people who tell God, what you give me, what you bless that's in my hands, I will offer back to you. And I guarantee you, there is no better investment. There is no better investment. Pray, find an intercessor. Ensure that you commit to God in your studies, in everything that you do. And things will not only go smoothly, things will go for the glory of God. Glory be to God forever.
So, I feel like sometimes, especially during exam time or like moments of high stress, you really get caught up in this whole idea of like just succeeding and getting it over with. It doesn't even become like, for our future, it just becomes like something tedious that we need to finish. Like, even if it's not studying, like, we come to a point in our semester or in our school year where we're just exhausted and we don't even care. Like, we just need to finish. Like, what would you say to us?
I'll tell you guys the same thing that we used to teach our employees before the priesthood. Anybody who does not take the time to write out their own personal objective in life and detail. You guys ever heard of what a SMART goal is? You've heard me say this before, right? A SMART goal. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time managed. Okay? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time managed. Write for yourself a real career goal and include God in there. Talk about the person that you want to be at the age of 30. Write it down. And when you go through those moments of, I just want to get this over with, no. Take that paper out and remind yourself of why it is that you're doing this. And if God is included in that statement, I guarantee you, anytime you have a motivation, anytime you keep that motivation in front of you, it changes the way you act. And you guys all know what I'm talking about. There's people who study because they want the 100, and there's people who study and they do the math as to how much does it take to just pass this. Because I'm not even looking to I don't care to be at top of the class. Forget percentiles. I just want to get out. Right? I was that guy. I would sit down and calculate, and then I would look at my book and say, okay, so I need to get 60 on this exam to get my 50 to pass. And then I would try to assess which subjects are going to come up, that if I study those, that's about 60% of the material. Disaster. I was a disaster. Write down that objective. Make it clear in front of you. We had one manager who told all of her employees, bring in a picture of what motivates you to go into work every day. Some people brought in a picture of their spouse. People brought in a picture of their children. Some people brought in a picture of their home because they want to renovate it. Some people brought in a picture of a boat because that's what they want to purchase. And every one of them had a motivational factor. And she bought frames for every one of them. And she told them, put that picture in that frame and put it on your desk. And every single time you feel like not being here, take a look at it. I invite you guys to do the same thing. Find an intercessor. Or find a prayer or a meditation or a verse. Or find anybody that you'd like. Or any statement that you want to write down. Frame it. Put it somewhere where you could see it. And when you don't feel motivated, take it out and read it. Take it out and look at it. Remind yourself of why you're going through all of this. If you can do that, it'll change your perspective.
But what if we don't have a clear-cut goal? Like, what if we don't actually know if we want to become a doctor or a lawyer or like whatever we want to be?
So drop the career aspect of that goal, but you obviously have a goal. Right? You might not want to be, like, I don't think anybody sits here and says, I want to be the senior manager of operation effectiveness at the national, okay? Like, I'm not talking about the specific title.
Right.
But if you want to talk about, I want to be a successful professional who works not only to support my family, but also to build the kingdom through my success. That alone could be the statement that you want to repeat to yourself. Some of you already know what you want to be. Some of you might have no clue, but this is the time to think about it. If you don't have a goal, build one. And if you can't go long term, start with short term. Anything else? What's so funny?
What if you're not lazy but you just suck at life?
I don't think that, like, if you guys are here, you obviously don't suck at life. You want to meet people who suck? Well, Mikey, hold on. No, but for real, you guys want to talk about people who have it hard. Like, talk to teachers. Talk to teachers who see people who, like they'll give 200% of themselves. And they just don't have the capacity. Our problem, you know how they say there's a difference between will and skill? If you're here, you have the skill. It's the will that you have to question. People who don't have the will, people who don't have the skill, 9 times out of 10, they don't even make it to university. That's the truth.
I just feel like you're oversimplifying the matter. It's not just about bringing it to God and asking God to like show the world His glory through you. It's not that simple.
What is it? What's simple in what I said?
It's simple. You're basically saying it's a request that you make to God, and He grants you that request.
Well, if we had an hour, maybe I could elaborate. But no, you're absolutely right in saying that if you perceive it just as that, that's obviously not the goal. Because God doesn't grant those requests based on the fact that you ask. If that was the case, tomorrow morning I'd ask Him for a Lamborghini. God doesn't grant requests just because you asked.
No, but even with hard work, like,
No, with hard work, God blesses.
God blesses, but people have different talents. People have different abilities. It's not like we're all on one level in every aspect of our lives.
Well, I don't think that's what I was hinting at. When I say God blesses and God uses it for the glory of His name, it doesn't mean that every single one of you guys are going to be valedictorians. It doesn't mean that every single one of you guys is going to make a 6-digit salary when you graduate. This doesn't mean that every single one of you guys is going to buy a house on the side of the water. It's not it at all. I mean, we just lost a parish member at St. George and St. Anthony's whose name was Nabi Abdul Malik. This man was a genius. Genius. He actually helped the government of Canada to be able to build the arm of the robot that got them to the moon. The man wrote a book this big, specifically on some sort of math equation, that the library of Oxford University called him personally and said, ship this over to us because we need to have it in our math section. The man was a genius beyond measure. Beyond measure. And God used him for the glory of His kingdom. He lived in an apartment on Montreal Road, a very humble life. Came to church almost 5 days or 6 days, 8 days a week the man lived at church. The man lived at church. And he indebted himself. He got tremendously in debt. And he almost got into major trouble with the law for some of the things that he did to be able to help the poor. You ask me, did God use him for the glory of the kingdom? Absolutely. Was he successful? Without any question of a doubt. Was he rich? Not anywhere close. Not anywhere close. That's a great example. The idea is not to say, and that man asked God, and he said, use me. And God did. Most people who say to God, use me, they're not on the cover of Forbes. So that's not what we're saying. But I will tell you this, if you tell God, use me, and you say, I submit and I'll follow what you tell me, it is that simple. God will change you. Just have the courage to say it. Because people who say, take me and use me, God says, are you ready? Because Space Mountain kind of ride. That's what's going to happen if you tell God, use me. And that's the kind of thing that God takes you through. God doesn't take you in people. I've heard one sermon where one of the fathers, the priest, talks about how, when you get into the car with God and you tell Him to drive, it's bumpy. No, I'm not talking about bumpy. I'm talking about God will flip your life upside down if you tell Him, take my life. He will. He will. Not in a good way. So for those who come to God and say, take my life, God will definitely bless. But you better be ready.
It's like the sermon that Father Max just gave this Sunday. He was saying how when the Lord told His disciples that He was going to be king, or that He was going to be the king they thought, 2 of them went to Him and they were like, oh, give us a place on your right and your left hand. And He's like, are you prepared to drink from the cup that I'm going to drink? And they're like, in their mindset, it's all like, oh, He's going to be king of Jerusalem, like a king on earth. And Christ is like, you guys don't understand completely. Like, if you're asking me of this to use you to make you one with me, then literally, like.
And when He was on His throne, who was on His right and on His left? Two thieves. Two thieves. Space Mountain. It's not an easy ride. But for those of us who tell God, even my studies, take them and transform them, He'll bless them. He'll bless them.
Do you think sometimes it could be easy?
Sorry?
Sometimes, is it always hard, or sometimes it might be easier?
Well, I'll say something that to me is a paradox. Okay? It's not a contradiction, it's a paradox. Going to God is simple. It's not easy. And there's a difference between the both. What He tells me to do is not complex. It's not a 42-step process. It's extremely simple. He says, submit. Give me your life, and I'll transform it. It's simple. Is it easy to do? No, it's not. No, it's not.
Do you think sometimes it is there?
Well,
or is it like,
it's
I guess that's a bad, maybe that's not a good question.
it's so much easier. It is so much easier
Then
once you've tasted His love. Because if you and I have a long-term relationship and we grew up together, right? And I tell you, do the test with me where you fall backwards with your eyes closed and I'll catch you. Easy to do, right? Because you trust me, because you know me, right? But today we just met each other for the first time. If I wasn't the priest and I still had the beard and I told you, fall, I'll catch you, go, try. You'd probably be like, I have a class. And you'd walk off, right? So when you don't know God and He says, fall, I'll catch you. Not that easy. Glory to God forever and ever.